Hello and welcome to the debut episode of the Hot Tag on GoWake.net. This is our bi-weekly 60-minute audio fix of the latest developments in professional wrestling and our opinions and thoughts on what is happening. Pay-per-views, TV shows, we have a mailbag as well, we'll be answering questions. And my name is Adam Stephen Kelly and I'm joined by...
Hi guys, my name is Ed Kelly.
And we're actually brothers. He is 9 years my senior.
Yeah, but one thing that's important is we're both huge wrestling fans. My brother is more up to date with what's going on in the world of wrestling today, especially with Ring of Honor and TNA. And I'm more of an old school 80s, 90s fan. So when we come across topics during our interviews, you'll find out that he's going to probably answer the newer questions and I'll probably answer the older questions.
Yeah, so a bit of a kind of almost 10-year gap where things will be a bit of a dynamic between us in terms of when we started watching. And how old were you when you started watching wrestling?
I was probably 9 years old when I first started watching. It was probably around the era when Kurt Hennig first came in from the AWA into WWF at the time. Once I saw him wrestling, he was bringing a new style in with his technical skills to the big guys, the brawlers at the time, and after watching him I was hooked, and then when The Undertaker came in around that time as well, I was hooked on The Undertaker. So I've always been a big fan of the Hills, but that was the period from the late 80s that was my specialty.
And I guess I really got involved at the tail end of the Attitude Era actually. I was always sort of, I don't know, watching bits and pieces just based on what you were watching at the time and liking people like Ted DiBiase at the time. But never really got completely, obsessed, if you want to call it that, until the late 90s, I'd say.
Late 90s. I mean, this is one thing we're going to be talking about lots over the coming weeks. The state of wrestling today, what we like about it, what we don't like about it. And you've got to remember that our thoughts on here that we tell you are just our opinions. We're not trying to say this is set in stone, this should be done, this shouldn't be done. We're fans just like you guys are, but we're going to be telling you what we think can be done to make the wrestling world better, because at the moment it is flat. And talking about the characters such as Undertaker, DiBiase, personally I think that's what's wrong with wrestling today. We've lost the characters, we've lost the good versus evil side, we've lost the heels, we've lost the baby faces, but we'll get into that shortly. We'll start with our TV roundup, which this week is going to be heavily focused on the Jerry Lawler incident. For those of you who don't know, if you've been living in a cave, Jerry suffered a heart attack live on Raw. Thankfully he is making a remarkable recovery, and his doctors have actually said he can actually get back in the ring sooner rather than later, so it's a great thing that Jerry has recovered. But Adam, do you want to divulge more on what happened?
Yeah, absolutely. Live on Monday, Jerry Lawler had a heart attack during Raw, and I was watching it live at the time, and it was a pretty scary and grim scenario, watching that. Basically, I was just during a commercial break actually just reading through a wrestling website, and it said that Jerry Lawler had a health scare, and I misread it at the time and thought that it said he collapsed or passed out or something, but he was actually continuing on commentary, and I didn't actually notice that he had stopped commentating. It was just Michael Cole, and then it wasn't until Michael Cole actually said on the show that Jerry Lawler had been taken to the backstage and was receiving CPR that it really hit home what was going on. And it was a very grim situation on Monday, and it was very reminiscent.
I was just going to say it was very reminiscent and eerie, as it was Over the Edge in '99 with, of course, Owen Hart. Michael Cole was relaying the information he had. You saw Jim Ross back in '99, and you looked at that and you thought, this isn't good. It was scary. It left you feeling numb. Luckily, Joe's okay now, but I just want to say that I think Michael Cole did a hell of a job carrying on the show and handling it the way he did. When he obviously it was very upsetting for everyone. I understand Vince McMahon was with Jerry all the way to the hospital, and it was a hell of a job that it was a WWE live event when they had the EMTs and the paramedics and the doctors to be able to support Jerry, because otherwise he wouldn't be here. And you'll find we're going to answer some questions later on that might have something to do with Jerry Lawler. We're going to look through those, look for our mailbag, pick some out. But we are going to be looking at not as in memory of Lawler, because obviously he's still here, luckily, but we're going to be looking at the match he had at Super Clash with Kerry Von Erich, which was a very bloody, brutal battle. We'll be discussing that later. I think right now we should maybe look at some mail, Adam.
Yeah, definitely. We basically, even though it's the Hot Tag Mailbag, we have set up an email address for that. But for the first few questions, we were doing them through Twitter on social media, and we've come up with we've got 4 questions here that we're going to answer on this debut episode. But if you do have any questions or any feedback on this debut episode, please do send them to the Hot Tag Mailbag, and the email address is hottagmailbag@yahoo.com. It's all the 3 words, but obviously no spaces, no full stops, no hyphens or anything, just hottagmailbag@yahoo.com. Send us your questions and your thoughts, and we will do our very best to answer them on the next episode. So the first question that we have is from Simon Parks, and he says, what do you think of Ring of Honor? Now, as Edward alluded to earlier, he's not too familiar with Ring of Honor. Have you watched any of it, or just bits and pieces?
I've seen very few bits and pieces. I mean, what I've seen, I understand it is more pure wrestling with less storylines than its big boy counterparts. But what I have seen, I have been very impressed with what I've seen with the pure wrestling side. But I really can't give you much more opinion than that.
Yeah, I first started watching Ring of Honor in 2004, because over here, obviously, we're in the UK. And in 2004, just after WrestleMania 20, there was a channel launched called the Wrestling Channel, and unfortunately it's gone now. But it was basically brought, pro wrestling that had never been seen in the UK before onto UK TV screens. You had like New Japan Pro Wrestling, Pro Wrestling Noah, and that's around the time I really got heavily interested in Japanese pro wrestling. But Ring of Honor was one of the programs on there. They had their TV, not their TV show. They had supercards, Ring of Honor supercards they were called, and that's when I was first introduced to Ring of Honor, and I followed it kind of through the years. But recently I've started ordering their pay-per-views, their iPay-per-views online, and I do enjoy Ring of Honor, although my opinion of it at the moment has kind of something to do with the in-ring style, and although it is more focused on pure wrestling, there's something to do with the kind of value and worth of moves in Ring of Honor that is a bit different from other companies. One kind of prime example to compare is that the DDT, when Jake Roberts invented that, although of course by accident, it became this really devastating finish, and no one kicked out of the DDT. But obviously as wrestling has evolved, for dramatic purposes, you need people to eventually kick out, and then other people started using the move, and now it's just a common move. But in Ring of Honor, you'll see something like a superplex from the top rope, and then the guy doing the move will float over and then hit a DDT, and then he'll pick him up again, all in one fluid motion. He'll do a fisherman suplex, and then pick him up again and do like a Death Valley driver, and then he'll get a 2 count. And this happens in every match in Ring of Honor, and I think the worth of moves has just gone, and then he'll end up winning with like a small package or a brainbuster or something after he's already delivered these huge high impact moves. And I think that kind of does put me off a bit, because although the wrestling is certainly very athletic and much more pure wrestling based, I think the value of the manoeuvres in there has dramatically decreased, and it's like, well, where can you go from there eventually when you've seen everything and you've done everything in the same match?
Okay, I've heard some rumours that Ring of Honor isn't in a particularly good state at the moment, whether that's financially or TV-wise, I don't know. Can you allude to any more to that at all?
Yeah, I don't know, real up-to-date information on that, but yeah, apparently it isn't doing too well financially, and I think they believe they're having some issues with I believe it's Sinclair who does their TV for them. I know the iPay-per-views have been doing okay numbers. They're getting a few thousand buys on the internet pay-per-views, but they have been having some major problems with their pay-per-views actually, because the live feed has been going down a lot. That's been happening I think since they started, and they keep saying it's going to be fixed, and it keeps not getting fixed. I think it's been okay. It was okay for the last pay-per-view, but only time will tell what happens with that.
Let's move on to a question from Diana Robinson, She says, "What do you think of the Bound for Glory series?" Well, I'm going to start off with that one because I must admit I have tried to get excited by TNA. I try and watch it weekly, the Impact show. However, I just cannot get motivated by it with what is happening there. The Bound for Glory series, when does it stop and when does it end and when does it start again? It's every week they have open fight night for it, and they have this match here, and when the points go on the board, 1 week so and so's got these many points, and you think, well, last week he only had so many, but they say at a house show, you wonder whether these points are just being added on without any matches. You just don't know. I mean, and they have these call outs. It's the same matches every week. Most people are fighting the same people. TNA, I just can't get my head around TNA. What they can do, because I don't think if it wasn't for the financial backing that Dixie Carter has with her family, and they keep pumping money into it to keep it afloat, for me it's just a nothing company. What do you think, Adam?
In terms of the Bound for Glory series, actually, this past Sunday, No Surrender, it came to an end, actually, finally, because Jeff Hardy won the Bound for Glory series, defeating Bully Ray in the finals. So it has finally ended, and the main event was set for Austin Aries versus Jeff Hardy for the World Heavyweight Championship. But in terms of the Bound for Glory series, it does go on for far too long. Was it three or 4 months?
At least I should think. And sorry to cut you off there, but one thing I find with TNA, with the championship there, is I would have liked to see them keep that belt on Robert Roode. Because when I look at Robert Roode, I see someone that is in the same mould of a Ric Flair, of a Nick Bockwinkel, someone, excuse me, sorry, laughing now. But I see someone you look at, and you look at that guy, the way he carries himself, and he looks like class, and he looks like he is the world champion. Now, to me, Austin Aries, no offence to him, he's a tremendous wrestler, but he doesn't have the size to be competing with these guys. And I'm not being sizist here, if there's a word for that. And going back to the late 80s, when it was all the big guys, the Hogans, the Andres, the Warriors, that were holding the titles because they were the big brawlers, and the smaller guys was considered to be more technical. But I can't see Austin Aries. I look at him and think, this guy is the world champion of this company, and he's the greatest man that ever lived. I can't see it. He was in TNA before, I believe. Adam, wasn't he? He was there before?
Yeah, he was. I believe he was originally there as Austin Aries, and then he became Austin Starr along with Alex Shelley, I believe, when they had their paparazzi faction. But then he got released, I think. See, I mean, the guy's talented. Yes, X-Division champion. I mean, this is just my opinion. This is not something I'm saying he's set in stone. You guys have your opinions on himself. A lot of you guys love Austin Aries, and he's a great wrestler. But I would have liked to have seen Robert Roode be ridden, because I don't think it'll be long before the guys from New York are going to come knocking for him. And some of the others, like James Storm, he's another class act. He's a great wrestler. He's got, I'm sure he's one of the biggest merchandise sellers of the company as well. So I think they need to put someone with the belt that brings more prestige with that title. And going back to the Bound for Glory series, as I said, it ended this past a week ago, actually, at No Surrender. I can't believe it's already been a week. Yeah, so it's finally ended after like 4 months or whatever. I do think, like you said, I think the whole house show, racking up points on house shows is entirely pointless. I think it kind of devalues the whole series. But the thing that, for this year especially, is the second annual Bound for Glory series. I think it's totally worthless because of what happened last year. I mean, okay, although it does go on for way too long, I think the general concept of the Bound for Glory series, works fine. But, and I heard it was some kind of political issue last year that they didn't put they didn't put the belt on Robert Roode or Bobby Roode. I can't remember what he was known as then. Against Kurt Angle in the main event of last year's Bound for Glory. Yet, you can't have a tournament that lasts for 3 or 4 months and then just have the guy lose, because where's the logic in that? Again, apparently it's some kind of political issue at the back, but nevertheless, it kind of instantly makes the tournament worthless. It's like, well, why would I want to see it for a second year or even beyond when the first time round it basically, came to nothing? So it's basically just made me think, well, that was a complete waste of 4 months of viewing.
Exactly, and this goes regarding the switching of the belts all the time. This is, this goes with WWE as well, and also this happened in WCW before it closed in 2001. You never knew who the champion would be. You could stop watching it for a few weeks, switch back on the TV, another guy would have the strap. Now, I understand it's their company, their belt, but if you want to put the prestige into the title, you should have a guy that you trust and you're prepared to put your company's interests in as the champion and ride him and ride him and ride him. For example, Ric Flair, probably the greatest, in my opinion, the greatest heavyweight champion of all time. Countless titles. I think everyone stopped counting at 16. But he put so many guys over as the champion, gave them credibility. But every night he'd get beaten up badly, and then, but when the match was finished, he'd still have his arm raised, and he'd still have the belt. So it didn't hurt him to get beat and put guys over, but he still kept the belt. And you looked to that guy, and you knew he was the champion. Whereas in WCW, of course, you had David Arquette was the champion, and David Arquette was supposed to be a fantastic guy, and he gave all his proceeds to the Owen Hart family. But the belt was switching there. 1 minute Goldberg had it, then Kevin Nash had it, and then Hogan had it, and Double J had it. With TNA, I mean, you have a tournament that lasts for months and months and months, and everyone thinks, great, we're going to see a new champion. Does it happen? No, possibly. But that's the problem. No one knows who has the titles, and the titles aren't meaning anything anymore.
Yeah, I think it's like you say with Ric Flair. I mean, arguably the greatest, professional wrestler of all time. Think of all the people that, he put over, yet he is, regarded as the greatest of all time, in many circles. And I think the mentality these days is a lot of people are too afraid to, let people go over because, they're worried about losing their spot and everything. But it's like, well, if you're that good, then, just look at Ric Flair and you'll see, that you're not necessarily that's not necessarily going to happen, because just look at him as a shining example. In terms of championships, the belts switching week to week. One thing that's actually happening in WWE right now is that CM Punk has had the championship for almost 1 year, and I believe he's just passed. Who was it? I've forgotten who it was now, but he's just passed someone to become, I believe it's the 10th or the 9th longest running WWE champion in history. And apparently Triple H is in favour of longer title runs now that he's getting more control over creative in WWE. So it's interesting to see where that's going in terms of champions after Punk and also the other titles as well.
Okay, we're skiing off course a little bit here, and I think we've spent enough time. We've given TNA enough airtime for the moment. So let's talk about question 3. Is from Peter Levinson. What do you think of the current state of wrestling, and what can be done, if anything, to improve this? Right, first of all, this is a huge subject. This cannot be answered in a 1 hour interview, and we want your opinions on this at home. We like your opinions on what can be done to improve it, or what should they be doing more of, what should they be doing less of, who could WWE bring in from TNA or Ring of Honor, or who could TNA try and steal from WWE that isn't really doing a lot at the moment. First of all, the wrestling business at the moment, it is a dying business. It is a very flat, dying business. If you look at the trends, people will say it's going to come back. These things come back in circles and cycles, and I hope it does, because at the end of the day, you're listening to this as wrestling fans. We're talking to you as wrestling fans as well. State of wrestling at the moment. I mean, at the moment, I think the problem is WWE has no competition, and people who are fans of TNA, I'm sorry, but Vince McMahon is not at all worried about TNA wrestling or Ring of Honor. If Vince McMahon was worried about TNA, I think he could have bought the company. He doesn't even want the video library. That's what I think TNA, Vince McMahon thinks of TNA. At least with WCW, when they had Monday Night Wars rolling on, WWE had to look at itself, look at the product, look at the talent, and it had to make, we had legends created. Like The Undertaker was reinvented in that time. Stone Cold became Stone Cold Steve Austin. Kane was brought in during his time, and there was a hell of a run with him. Yeah, so WWE during this time had to change to compete. But now, they don't have to worry about selling out the arenas because there's only WWE is the only show in town at the moment. TNA, I mean, you get tickets to see that at the park entrance for free if you go into the Universal Parks. So WWE, they know they're going to go to a town. Everyone's going to want to see them. They don't have to raise their game at the moment. What do you think, Adam?
Yeah, in terms of TNA, they're really having trouble filling up the venues for the house shows at the moment, and also their TV show attendance and the pay-per-view attendance is very down. The TV ratings aren't down. TNA, it's never ever going to be competition for WWE. They're barely getting a 1 rating at the moment. Never ever. I don't think there is ever going to be competition for WWE. And the thing about that is that as much as I think Vince McMahon wants competition, because look at the Monday Night Wars, and I think Vince thrived on, and the whole company thrived off the competition of WCW and the fact that they were losing in the ratings war for nearly a year. I think it was. Was it nearly a year?
Oh, over a year.
Over a year, yeah. Obviously, it's a double-edged sword because at the same time, Vince McMahon doesn't want to be on the losing end of the ratings war again. Although it does, I think, bring out the best in people. When you're literally, WWE back then was literally fighting for survival, and I think it's quite easy to get complacent when when there is no competition.
Adam, let me ask you this: if you look at the WWE roster today, or the TNA roster, not talking about just guys that are in the main events, but who can you name that is a genuine superstar?
We've mentioned people like there's the obvious people like Triple H and Undertaker who are being phased out, I guess you could say. In terms of the current kind of new generation crop, do you mean?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the roster today, arguably Undertaker, superstar, John Cena, superstar, Triple H, winding down, we know, but still superstar. But you've really got very few. I mean, CM Punk, obviously a superstar now. He's done Randy Orton. But you look at the rosters in the late 80s and very early 90s, and you had Hulk Hogan was a superstar, Sergeant Slaughter. People hated him. People wanted to kill him. Andre the Giant, Ultimate Warrior, love him or hate him, he was a superstar. Ted DiBiase, superstar. Mr. Perfect, larger than life characters, and they might have been considered obviously characters, where opposed to people like John Cena, people may see him as more real people, but they were WWF at the time superstars, and you wanted to switch on the TV and you wanted to watch them. You wanted to watch people like the $1 Million Man. You wanted to see someone kick his butt every single week. You wanted to see Hulk Hogan drop the leg. You wanted to see the Warriors ring entrance. People were standing ovations. People were off their seats. Nowadays, you watch Raw, they're sitting on their hands. They're not really interested. You can hear people talking in the audience sometimes over what's going on the ring because it is just so dead.
Yeah, I think in terms of modern day bona fide superstars, there is this kind of difference these days where only a few people, members of the roster, you would you think look like stars and they work like stars, and I'm not one of these people who's like okay, well, Daniel Bryan can't be a larger than life superstar because he's not big enough or whatever. I'm completely against that mentality, but I think it doesn't matter what size you are or how athletic you look. If you have the presence of a star and your character is that established, then that's what's going to work. But there are very few superstars on the current WWE roster, at least, that really stand out. I mean, like you said, there's Randy Orton. I think Dolph Ziggler's definitely one. You know, I think I expect great things from Dolph Ziggler, and I hope he actually gets a run with the World Championship this year. But I think part of the problem is that Vince McMahon perhaps he's not with the times, and it's perhaps affecting his ability to create these characters that think of all the memorable characters that Vince helped create, and you look at today and there aren't that many kind of characters. Everyone's just an average Joe, and I think perhaps it's some kind of Vince McMahon's not with the times. And in the days of kayfabe and whatever, there was all these characters who were you'd never get away with today, because today they just look so cheesy. I mean, who would watch? Kamala would not get over today because just because of his gimmick, it just wouldn't fly today.
I think what's lost in wrestling today is when you watched wrestling on TV back in the day before the 80s, 90s, even up to the Attitude Era, when you bought a ticket, or anyone who buys a wrestling ticket, they buy it because they work 9 to 5 jobs. This is a statistic. They can't disprove it. 9 to 5. They go out. They would buy a wrestling ticket, and for those 3 hours of that wrestling show, they want, they want their. I think it's called suspended belief, is it, or something they call it? Suspended disbelief. For 3 hours, they want to, just sit there and be entertained. You forget. I mean, you go to a wrestling event, and The Undertaker. Now, The Undertaker, yes, he's not really dead. They call him the dead man. We know he's not dead, but that's his gimmick. That's his gimmick for years. But I don't care about that. All I want to do is go there and see The Undertaker entrance, watch him wrestle, watch him tombstone someone, chokeslam someone, watch him walk the ropes. Unfortunately, he doesn't do that spot anymore. But I don't care about that. I just want to be entertained. I cannot watch Raw when what's the guy with ginger hair? Is it Heath Slater? I watch him take up the TV airtime, getting his arse whipped every week by, was it Lita the other week? Mm-hmm. And they brought back in Sid Vicious, which was good to see him back. Good to see him powerbomb him. Now, start wasting your airtime on these guys that are never going to become superstars. And spend your time building up people that you think are going to be superstars. I mean, when they brought in characters before, or any superstars back in the day, they would do these vignettes and slowly bring them in. And after about a month's worth of these little vignette videos on Raw, you get excited. You want to see this person. Say Razor Ramon. I mean, I remember all the skits he did in Miami on the beach and being the bad guy. When Kurt Hennig came in, they do his Mr. Perfect vignettes. So when he came in, people knew who he was and they're excited to see him. Nowadays, they bring a guy in, and you don't know anything about them, and they can't deliver.
I think you mentioned there Kane and the Undertaker. I think those characters, they only kind of get over in a sense today because they've been around for so long. And I think if you introduce someone now who had that kind of supernatural mystique about their characters, it just wouldn't fly. And I think that's one of the things, again, like I said, that in terms of creating characters, there's this kind of divide in terms of WWE, because you need to create these, like I said about Kamala and the Undertaker and Kane and everything. They were timely characters, but these days, that just doesn't work. It's a new generation, it's a new audience, for a large part. You need to create these characters which are a sign of these times, and I think wrestling is sports entertainment. It's this combination of athleticism and storytelling, and people don't turn on TV shows like Curb Your Enthusiasm or Mad Men or Sons of Anarchy. People turn on these shows because they want to be entertained by characters, and with wrestling, it is it's a glorified soap opera, and whatever people want to say, that's what it is. It's these larger than life characters who have these arcs, basically, who grip you and interest you, and you watch their development over time, who happen basically to the hook is that their ability to wrestle and get it on in the ring. It's that combination which I think is in some ways it's kind of lost in both ways. There's that lack of character development, and there's the kind of, for a lot of people, there's the lack of wrestling as well.
Okay, should we move on to question 4?
Yep, actually this ties in quite well with question 3. This one by another Simon, Simon Everett. What do we think of the lack of kayfabe in the business, and do you think it's possibly down to the likes of the dirt sheets and shoot interviews and superstars exposing the business?
Well, as we've alluded to already, I'm more a fan of the older style wrestling, and I think kayfabe is a lost art. I understand why it's gone, but I don't really think it can be blamed on your shoot interview guys, because you've got guys like kayfabe commentaries, Rob Feinstein doing it, and they do a very good job of it. I must say, I'm a big fan of our video, and if they weren't doing it, someone else would be. So you can't blame these guys for doing it again in their thirst. And also, these going to the shoot interviews, these are interesting. These give you an insight into the wrestling business that you would never see and never hear from watching a WWE show. I mean, you hear things about the road stories and the ribs, paying your dues. I mean, this is something that's a problem nowadays, is when you're a wrestler, if you're wrestling, say, for an indie promotion and you get picked up by a WWE talent scout, they sign you to a developmental contract, and you go off, say, I think it was Ohio Valley. They were going with Jim Cornette. I think that's been scrapped now. But you go there, and they teach you and get you ready for WWE. That's the problem. I think they just get ready for the WWE. They don't get you ready to wrestle. And going back to the kayfabe, I think it should be brought back in many respects, because you had the heels and the baby faces. Now, I'm sure that if you've not been living under a cave for the last few years, you know that heel is a bad guy and a face or a baby face is the good guy, and these were always separated. And if these guys, say, with a who's the cowboy from Mid South, Bill Watts. Now, if you had been a baddie and you gone into the good guys just changing room, or you were seen at the airport talking to a face, you would have been either fired, slapped about, certainly fined, because if a fan saw you, you'd be in big trouble. And he used to say, and also, if you got in a fight with Bill Watts saw you in the fight and you didn't win that fight, you'd be sacked as well, because you had to be believed that you were badder than everyone else. That's what's the problem with kayfabe. They should bring this back, because guys need to learn about this, and they need to learn the ins and outs of wrestling before they go to a place like WWE, paying their dues. I mean, Vern Gagne, had his training camps. You had the Florida camps as well. People would go from territory to territory, and there'd be the travelling. I mean, wrestlers should be forced to travel up and down in cars, talk to each other, drink beer, back of a car, drink beer, talk about wrestling, go to the camps, go from town to town, work for $25 a night if you have to, get the experience, because in the long run it will pay you off. Adam?
I kind of disagree with you slightly, because although I completely agree with in principle, I think it's totally dead, and that's not anyone in particular's fault. I'm not going to blame any websites. I'm not going to blame the shoot interviews. But 20 years ago, the business was closed off. There was that divide between performer and audience, and today it's almost one and the same. The business has been blown wide open. The thing I quite happily blame, is just the internet. And like I said, it's not any particular person, it's not any particular website, but literally the information age. People hopping online to discuss wrestling on forums. The internet and the information age has become such an important part of people's lives that everyone's on it. All the wrestlers are on it, and it's just everyone can just share any information, obviously, and it's just, I think that's what has killed kayfabe. But I don't think that I don't think you're going to be able to go back to that, because everyone knows everything these days, and the information age is hardly going anywhere. So
I think, going back to the dirt sheets as well, the problem I have with the dirt sheets is that these guys rate the matches, and they very rarely seem to have anything positive to say about the wrestlers and the matches, and I think that's what's hurting the wrestling business as well. Because, I mean, I don't know what grounds these guys have, apart from being fans, to write these comments and reviews. I know that the wrestlers read them, but in a wrestling business today that is suffering and struggling and will continue to struggle, in my opinion, we need the fans on our side. Now, if the fans are reading these sheets and they're thinking, oh well, you know, if this is bad, I'm not going to watch it this week. I can't, you know, they're slagging this wrestler off. They're saying this about him. You know, the wrestling business needs to pull together, because that's the only way this industry is going to get any better.
Yeah, the thing is, you know, I read so many, you know, reports and reviews and people commenting on websites and the comment sections or whatever, and people just completely slating wrestling. Although we've been talking, you know, quite negatively about the state of wrestling, you know, it's just our opinion. I think people like you said, people just need to pull together and support the industry, rather than just. I mean, people just slate absolutely everything and nitpick, and you know, okay, it might not be what you want to see. You know, say on that episode of Raw, or you were disappointed because you heard that someone was coming back or whatever, and they didn't. You know, just support whatever company it is that you want to see, and just, I mean, don't be so negative all the time. I mean, it does get quite annoying. Just, you know, endless reports that I've read, you know, just saying a whole show is bad, and people just don't offer any. People just slate something, don't actually offer any constructive criticism most of the time, unfortunately, and I think that's a big problem. And you know, it's like in WWE, absolutely everything is blamed on the PG rating, and it's like, well, okay, that doesn't make any sense half the time, because all the PG rating does is get rid of bad language, which is still you know, put on the show anyway, as much as they do their best to bleep it out, and basically blood, that's it. And you know, divas facing off against men or whatever, but the PG rating isn't the be all and end all of WWE. I mean, it has always predominantly been family entertainment, no matter what. You know, look at the Attitude Era, even though the year was kind of the edgier content. The PG rating is blamed for basically absolutely every flaw that people think about the WWE product at the moment. But in actuality, so much of what these people think is bad about a show has absolutely nothing to do with the PG rating.
And if you want to get a look into the wrestling business and find out what's wrong with it, how to improve it, and about what wrestlers think of the kayfabe, then going back to the shoot interviews, where it's kayfabe, high spots, RF video, the interviews these wrestlers give you a good insight of what they think, and they're in the business. Some of them have been in the wrestling business for 25 years, some have been in for 5 minutes, gone into WWE, etc., been used, left for whatever reason, but they can give you an opinion on what they. I mean, most of the wrestlers there seem to think that kayfabe is a good thing. I mean, they think that they should have more. You know, the kayfabe was good and it protected the business. But obviously, they're talking about themselves, so they're actually breaking their own thing by talking to these guys. But I'm in favour of the shoot interviews rather than the dirt sheets, because it's an insight. It's an insight into a world that's gone.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with kayfabe. I just think it's, you know, like I said, something that's just dead and not coming back, basically just because of the times. But you know, I do very much agree with it in the sense, and I wish it was still around, because you know, as much as we probably wouldn't be doing this podcast right now, you know, I would love to be kind of, you know, gripped by the mystique and magic of pro wrestling, and that's another thing people complain about is, you know, they look at the spoilers and they look at the reports on the dirt sheets and they complain about something saying it was predictable. Well, you just ruined the surprise of who was coming in 2 weeks on Raw, because you looked it up on the internet. And I'm as bad as everybody else. I was, you know, reading these reports and everything just because I can't help myself. But that's the kind of mentality that people have, and it's like illogical.
Okay, Adam, I believe you've got a DVD competition this week.
Yep. One of the things we're going to be doing on the Hot Tag is running competitions, because we have teamed up with Silvervision, the DVD and Blu-ray WWE distributor in the UK, Europe, and the Middle East. And we're going to be running international DVD and Blu-ray giveaways. And we have one on this very debut episode. Although this is a UK DVD, we are going to be sending this wherever you are in the world. Just make sure you have a region-free DVD player. But Falls Count Anywhere has just come out on DVD. The Greatest Street Fights and Other Out-of-Control Matches, which came out on September 10th in a triple DVD and double disc Blu-ray set. It's hosted by Mick Foley and takes a look at over 30 years of bouts from WWE, NWA, WCW and ECW. But yes, Falls Count Anywhere, The Greatest Street Fights and Other Out-of-Control Matches. We have 3 copies of the triple DVD set to give away, thanks to Silvervision. And all you need to do to be in with a chance of winning one of the 3 copies is answer the following question, and all you have to do is just send your name, location and answer to Hot Tag Mailbag at yahoo.com. Now the question we have got for you today, if you'd like to read that out.
Certainly. Very important title belt. Who was the very first WWF Intercontinental Champion, which was won in 1979 for the first time? Was it A, Ricky Steamboat, B, Pat Patterson, or C, Superfly Jimmy Snuka?
Yep. So who was the very first WWE Intercontinental Champion? Just send your answer, name and location to hottagmailbag at yahoo.com, and we will select 3 winners. Each one will receive a copy of WWE Falls Count Anywhere on DVD, which is out now thanks to Silvervision. We will select the winners at random, and they will be notified when the competition closes at midnight on Monday, September 24th. And like I said, this competition is not exclusive to just the UK. Anywhere in the world, as long as you've got a region-free DVD player, we will send it to you. So good luck to all those who enter. hottagmailbag at yahoo.com. Now, we were talking a bit earlier about No Surrender, TNA's last pay-per-view a week ago, because the Bound for Glory series ended, and we were going to just do a quick rundown of that pay-per-view, which you didn't watch, but you've heard what happened on the show, and I watched it live actually. TNA No Surrender 2012, which was live from the Impact Zone in Orlando, Florida, as so many of the pay-per-views are, unfortunately. A pretty dead crowd for most of the night, but no World Championship match. The show was built around the Bound for Glory series coming to an end. It kicked off with Jeff Hardy defeating Samoa Joe in a semi-final match. This was actually a rematch from Impact. I don't quite understand how it actually came about, because I thought that the fact that Jeff Hardy defeated Samoa Joe would mean that Samoa Joe was eliminated from the competition on Impact Wrestling, but apparently not. I was slightly confused there. If someone would like to explain that to me, please go ahead. But we had the semi-final match, an Impact rematch as the opening match on Bound for Glory on No Surrender. And we also had Bully Ray defeat James Storm in the second semi-final match, which set up the main event, which was the Bound for Glory series final, as Jeff Hardy defeated Bully Ray.
I'd like to give, I'm a bit biased regarding Samoa Joe, because if anyone will tell you I actually look quite like him, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know. But I'd like to see him be given more of a chance. I mean, last year's Bound for Glory series, he was, wiped out completely. They wasn't even in the running for it. Why they did that, I don't know, because he's a tremendous talent. I'd like to see him, in the near future, hopefully get a chance to run with the strap.
Yeah, Samoa Joe's kind of been dwindling for the last few years. Actually, I think the last time he was, a real main event player was when he had that feud with Sting, which I think that culminated at Bound for Glory a few years ago, perhaps 2008. And since then, he's kind of just dwindled about on the roster. And Samoa Joe at one time, around the time he came into TNA, he was one of the hottest superstars, pro wrestlers in the business. And I think being in TNA, he's gone from hot commodity to just this a great worker, but this kind of dwindling talent. And he's one guy who I'd like to see make the jump to WWE, because I think if they kept him, almost a kind of no gimmick needed guy, he would get over pretty well.
Just a legitimate shooter, really, isn't he, Joe?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, the World Tag Team Championship match, which features Christopher Daniels and Kazarian defeating AJ Styles and Kurt Angle. See, to me, I would have liked AJ and Kurt Angle to have gone over there because it's after the build-up of the, to me, one of the worst ever stories in wrestling with the AJ Styles and the what was her name? The drug girl. I can't remember her name. It's not important. You've all seen it. It was how terrible it was. But bad angle. So I like to see at least AJ Styles at the end of all that coming out with some gold.
Well, I think you may get your wish because I mean, how many tag team championship matches have these guys had in recent memory? I think that they faced each other at Slammiversary back in, was it June or July? But although they did lose to the World Tag Team Champions of the World, as they're known, Christopher Daniels and Kazarian at No Surrender, this week on Impact, AJ Styles defeated Kazarian in a good one-on-one match, and it's going to be AJ and Kurt Angle again against the champions at Bound. I think it's at Bound for Glory. So they're getting another championship match, and yeah, let's see how this one can be different from the last. God knows how many they've had, and hopefully they can actually finally go over and win the titles. Also, there was Rob Van Dam defeating Magnus. Wow. What can I say? I mean, Rob Van Dam, I'd like to see him back in WWE. I think he's been, pretty much wasted in TNA. And Magnus, I don't really have a lot to say about him, to be honest.
He has improved a lot, I think, Magnus. I mean, he was the only guy I've ever seen when he made his debut for TNA. He's the only guy on his debut when I actually thought he was going to get defeated, because he was terrible on his debut. But he has picked up, and I think he's been working hard on his physique, and his in-ring skills, and the stick on the shtick as well. For those of you who don't know what the shtick is, that's his mic skills. Yes, that's all I can really say about him as well.
He's a lot better than Rob Terry, let's say. I would say that.
Definitely.
Actually, Jeff Hardy on Impact again. Jeff Hardy's championship shot at Bound for Glory was up for grabs because he faced Bound for Glory. He faced Bully Ray in a rematch from Slammiversary because they had a horrendous match at Bound for Glory. Unfortunately, it was the closing match of the show, and basically it was almost a squash until the last 2 minutes when Jeff Hardy made this comeback. Hit about 3 twists of fate, and Bully Ray still kicked out, and finally hit the swanton for the win. I
mean, with Jeff Hardy as well, WWE, these wrestlers come along on their runs and they're doing a great bit of business, such as when Ken Anderson was there with the Mr. Anderson gimmick. Everyone thought he was going to get a run as the champion because he seemed to be Vince's boy at the time. But as you know, things go wrong, and I don't know what happened there, but he was sort of punished and he was knocked down the pecking order again and eventually released. Whereas Jeff Hardy, we all know about Jeff Hardy's problems, but he's been given another chance now. But you look at the talent roster and you wonder if Jeff Hardy goes to Bound for Glory now for the championship, if he does become champion, is he going to make his dates? Is he going to be a good champion? What sort of state is the guy in?
Well, only time will tell in terms of Hardy, but obviously hoping for positive thinking in terms of Hardy if he does walk away with the championship, and even if he doesn't, but yeah, he had a very kind of not a very good match against Bully Ray. I haven't actually seen his rematch yet against Bully Ray on Impact. Haven't yet seen that. I'm only halfway through the show at the moment, but hopefully it was better because they were basically built the whole match around an attack from Aces and Eights. Jeff Hardy was basically almost body slammed shoulder first into the ring post, and so this whole match was built around his injury. Aces and Eights attacked him during a fight with Austin Aries. Austin Aries against, I believe they're calling him the Arm Breaker. He was either Luke Gallows or Mike Knox. But yeah, Hardy and Bully Ray did not have a very good match. But in terms of Hardy versus Austin Aries, how do you think that will be as the main event of Bound for Glory?
Well, like I said before, personally, I'm not really a huge fan of Austin Aries. There's something about him I can't get on with. I mean, he's a great wrestler, but personally, I'm hoping that his title run is going to be a shorter one. But Jeff Hardy as well. Jeff Hardy, he's a fantastic high flyer. This is the problem with TNA. should they be putting their belt on him? I mean, if he wins, and he'll be the champion. But there's surely better guys there that were better champions for the company, and that's what's wrong with them. They haven't got that champion that's going to make other guys look good and build them up.
I was switching quick gears from one pay-per-view to another. No Surrender a week ago, and tonight WWE has its shot on pay-per-view with Night of Champions 2012, and it's a 7-match card, or 8 if you include the pre-show, because there is a Battle Royal booked to open. The winner of this Battle Royal, don't know who's in it yet, don't know how many people are, I imagine 20 odd superstars, competing for a United States Championship match later in the show against Antonio Cesaro, who those aren't familiar with WWE may know as Claudio Castagnoli. So only time will tell who faces Antonio Cesaro. I wouldn't be surprised if it's Santino Marella, and then they end up having that rematch again, because of course Cesaro beat Marella for the United States Championship after Marella basically killed the championship by defending it about twice in like 6 months or however long he held the title for. In terms of the actual main show, the main events, Sheamus will defend the World Heavyweight Championship against Alberto Del Rio again. I think this is the 3rd straight pay-per-view where they've had that match. No gimmicks at all, just a standard singles match. And I've enjoyed both matches actually, so I have high hopes for this one again, as long as they can keep it fresh and make it different from their previous 2 matches. But I don't know. I mean,
I think Del Rio again, aside from his gimmick, the posh boy, rich guy gimmick he obviously has, you look at the guy and everything about him oozes class. He can back it up. Everything he says, he can back it up with his technical ability and his skill. He's a big guy as well. People don't realise this because he's Mexican, but he's 6'5". I mean, he's a big guy. He's a fantastic wrestler, and I think he can be one of these guys like a Nick Botwinkle, where he can wrestle, look bad during the match, put the other guys over, but still have his hand raised. And I think if maybe he can have a run with the belt, but it would have to be, not just 3 months of it. I think it had to be, at least an 8-month run, maybe a year, and he can put some guys over, and they can build up some good. They can build up some challenges in that time. And I think that'd be good if he had the belt.
Yeah, I mean, with Sheamus, basically WWE trying to establish Sheamus as the top babyface on SmackDown. I think Alberto Del Rio, despite the fact that he's lost to Sheamus, in 2 straight pay-per-view losses for the World Heavyweight Championship, he still looks strong as the kind of number 1 villain on SmackDown. So I don't think he's been hurt at all by continually losing. Whether he actually finally gets the win on tonight, only time will tell. I'm not actually, this one's unpredictable for me. I couldn't tell you whether Sheamus is going to go over again or Del Rio is going to get his shot. But it'll be interesting to see where Dolph Ziggler fits into it all with his Money in the Bank briefcase. Although he does have many, many months left to cash it in.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that one against Randy Orton. It's a real clash of different. I mean, they both come across as the arrogant. I mean, is Randy Orton? Can you say he's a face or a heel, or is he he's the anti-hero, isn't he?
Yeah, basically. I mean, he's a baby face, but he hasn't really changed his demeanour since kind of the fan. He's one of these guys who his personality and his demeanour didn't change at all. But the fans just happen to embrace him as a babyface, and so I'd call him the anti-hero.
Yeah, I mean that match can really go either way. I mean that's one of the matches you can watch and you think, well, I really don't know who's going to win this one, which is another problem with wrestling nowadays. Is that, I mean, you used to watch Hulk Hogan wrestle, and you knew that Hulk Hogan was going to win the match because there was no way he was going to be defeated, and that was a problem with watching the Hogan matches for me, is because you knew that unless it was a very special moment, such as the Warrior at WrestleMania 6, that Hulk Hogan, unless he was going to be screwed over his title, was not going to be pinned 1, 2, 3 in the mat or submit. But nowadays, you see a superstar and the same thing happens. You almost know yourself. You think, well, he's not, so and so is not going to put so and so over. It's just not going to happen. Whether it's because of politics, I don't know. But that match, Randy Orton versus Ziggler, that's interesting because that really could go either way.
Yeah, I mean, Ziggler and Orton are actually 2 of the people who I really look forward to seeing them work. So for them to go against each other, on pay-per-view is a exciting prospect. And they have faced each other on Raw and SmackDown in recent weeks, but it'll be interesting to see what they can do on pay-per-view. And Randy Orton's about to shoot 12 rounds too, so maybe Dolph Ziggler's going to phase Orton out for a while whilst he goes away to shoot that film. I mean, he did the same to Chris Jericho, winning that loser leaves WWE match, of course his Money in the Bank briefcase was on the line for that match as well. But Ziggler phased Jericho out. Maybe he can do the same for Orton, and I don't think it's going to do wonders for Ziggler's stock in WWE. There is a tag team championship match. R-Truth and Kofi Kingston against the kind of odd couple, if you want to say that, of Kane and Daniel Bryan, who have been having their pretty hilarious anger management sessions over recent weeks. And although it's rumoured that R-Truth and Kingston were going to defend their titles against the Primetime Players, but that hasn't seemed to...
I think they saw more business out of the Kane and Daniel Bryan pairing, because at the moment their gimmick's sort of strong and they're funny. Their funniness is coming over, so I think it made probably more sense to pair them together.
Yeah, I think it's a star power issue, and otherwise, where would Kane and Daniel Bryan fit on the card? And of course, they've been building this for weeks now, and I think it's a pretty entertaining thing. I mean, I've always been a big fan of Kane, and I've always been a big fan of Daniel Bryan. So I think the only logical thing is for them to become the tag team champions to continue this angle. And although I'm not the biggest fan of these kind of odd couple tag teams, when they throw like John Cena and I think Shawn Michaels a few years ago captured the championship. Who was it? Cena was, I think, feuding with someone and he became the tag team champion.
When they make these mishmashes, should I say, it's not. Tag team wrestling. I wish they could bring some proper tag teams in, like it used to be with the tags. Again, don't get me started in this because I'll be here all day. Same with the managers. There's no Raw managers now, but I think they should get a good tag team division going and make the titles mean something. But going on to the Miz's match, the Intercontinental Championship match between fatal four-way between the Miz, Mysterio, Cody Rhodes, and Sin Cara. I want to go to some comments I heard Jim Cornette mention on YouTube on an interview about the Miz, and he was saying that the Miz, is there just to make the Hollywood breaks, the reality shows. He's not really there in heart as a wrestler, and I totally disagree with that. I think the Miz, he's a hell of a wrestler, and I think he's a fan of wrestling, and that's what he's there for first and foremost. I think Jim Cornette should retract his comments he made about the Miz, but regarding the match, should be an interesting one.
Yeah, I mean, both all four guys. Well, you've got three kind of high flyers, and there you got obviously the luchador dynamic of Mysterio and Sin Cara. Cody Rhodes is certainly light on his feet in the Miz, not so much, but four good solid mid card guys, and I think this match will be pretty exciting. I think it's going to be all over the place, but exciting nonetheless. There is a women's match as well, the Divas Championship on the line. Layla versus Caitlyn. Now this is a funny one because there was a battle royal a few weeks ago, and Eve was supposed to win, but she fell out the ring. And Caitlyn ended up winning the Battle Royal. So Caitlyn is getting a shot at the Divas Championship. For some reason it's not become a triple threat. They haven't interjected Eve into this match, so it is just still a singles match. So I'm just going to say that Layla's going to win because Caitlyn was never supposed to in the first place.
All in all, it looks like a pretty strong pay-per-view.
Don't forget the Cena match.
Oh, of course. You've not mentioned
WWE Championship, Cena and CM Punk again, the third time on pay-per-view in the last year. They had their match at Money in the Bank during the kind of WWE Summer of Punk angle last year storyline. That was my match of the year, I think, even surpassing Triple H versus The Undertaker, because I had not been genuinely excited by a wrestling match for years. And they had a good rematch at SummerSlam, and this is a whole new storyline. Punk now is the heel. John Cena's the babyface. Well, he's always been, but he's not pooed so much these days. I think this is going to be a really good match. They had did you see the promo from Raw? Bret Hart, Punk and Cena.
Yes, I did. Yeah, it was. It certainly makes you wonder whether Bret Hart's going to have anything to do with his match.
That would certainly be interesting. of course, that segment was kind of overshadowed by the whole Jerry Lawler situation, of course. But it was a hell of a segment, and really kind of a bit of a stamped the intensity on this match. And I'm excited, and genuinely excited to see these two go at it once again. So I think it's a pretty good card for Night of Champions.
It's good. I'd say it's worth parting with your hard-earned money for to pay-per-view.
Yeah, although I think the whole kind of gimmick. This is another subject for another time in terms of these gimmick match pay-per-views, and this isn't a gimmick match pay-per-view, but the whole kind of every championship is going to be on the line. I mean, what's it? There's 6 championships in all, and they're mostly all of them are defended anyway on every single pay-per-view, so it doesn't really make anything different or special. So I'm not a big fan of the whole Night of Champions situation, but it could just be another, some other random pay-per-view. But I think it's a pretty good card, and I think hopefully it's going to be a good show.
Okay, another segment we're doing every week to sort of finish off will be our match of the week, and we just basically discuss famous matches, our favourite matches, and perhaps if you'd like to send us your favourite matches in, we can discuss those with you as well. But this week, in sort of with our thoughts of Jerry Lawler, we want to look at the Super Clash Championship unification match he had with Kerry Von Erich at Super Clash 3. I remember that match. First of all, I remember obviously the blood, the sheer amount of blood in that match from both athletes. But I remember Kerry Von Erich wasn't quite 100% match fit for that one. He cut himself badly before the match, and they sort of had to integrate that into the match with Lawler cutting him over the top rope. Do you remember that one, Adam?
I remember the whole. I remember the bleeding now that you mentioned it. I remember Von Erich cutting himself before the match and then bleeding all over the place during the match. It's been a while since I've seen this actually, but
the referee actually had to stop it at the end and award the bout to Lawler because he said Kerry Von Erich was bleeding too badly. He wasn't safe. He couldn't see. So Lawler kept the title. I mean, I actually believe that really Kerry Von Erich believed that he was actually going in there to come out with the both belts for his. Of course, WCCW was his dad's company, so he didn't want to lay him down. But I don't think he was a fantastic champion, Kerry Von Erich, in that respect.
What did he cut himself with? I remember something like vaguely scissors or something.
Something. I mean, there's so many different versions of the story, but I think he was had been, let's say, he'd been partaking more than just a cold beer. Inebriated. And they had to actually incorporate the cut into the match, which is why Jerry Lawler cut him on the top rope. But there was so much blood in the end. That was the best finish for the match. But there was a hell of a brawl.
A 10 on the Muta scale.
Oh, definitely. I mean, it was horrific in that respect. I mean, you certainly couldn't get away with anything like that today with today's standards.
Yeah, speaking of bleeding, actually, this reminds me of these kind of out of control matches, and going back to Falls Count Anywhere. Actually, that DVD is I saw one of the first matches of its kind in WWE was this alley fight at Madison Square Garden back in 1981 between Pat Patterson and Sergeant Slaughter.
Oh yeah.
And these days, hardcore matches, Falls Count Anywhere matches, street fights, barred, they're basically one and the same. They happen every other week. But back then, 1981, no one had ever seen anything like that. And although the NWA was famous for certainly having its fair share of brawls and bloody matches, but this was WWE in front of his kind of home New York crowd, Madison Square Garden, and Sergeant Slaughter bled like a stuffed pig all over this match while Pat Patterson was laying the smackdown. Okay, well that brings us to the end of our very first show, and we hope you've enjoyed listening to our rants and raves. Again, you may agree with some of the stuff we say, you may disagree with all the stuff we say. It's purely our opinion and our just discussions and our love of wrestling. Remember, we're fans too. One thing I would like to say before we sign off is that one thing that's I've found over the last few days is Dutch Mantel, a very famous ex-wrestler. You all have heard of Dutch Mantel. If you go onto his Facebook page, and he won't mind you doing this, there is something he'd like you to sign on there. I won't go into all the details, but if you go onto Dutch Mantel, there's something he could do. He could do your signatures, and he could do with you supporting him or something. But if you go on his Facebook page or onto Dutch Mantel's site, he'll
let you know what he wants you to do. If you could do that, that'd be great.
Yes, thanks very much for listening to our debut episode of the Hot Tag podcast here on GoIt.net. Yeah, thanks so much. We really hope you've enjoyed it. Let us know what you think of the show. You can comment down below in the comment box. You can also send us your thoughts to the Hot Tag Mailbag, hottagmailbag@yahoo.com. Send us your questions as well. You had those 4 or 5 questions we did earlier. Please, anything you want to ask, just send in to us. Any matches you want to talk about, or what are your thoughts on the state of wrestling? We went into that earlier. Let us know what you have to say about that. Let us voice your opinions, and any Jerry Lawler matches that you really love that you'd like to send us your thoughts on. As we discussed, Cody Von Erich versus Jerry Lawler as our kind of match of the week. Go and check that one out from Super Clash 3. And I think that about does it for this episode. As we said, we are a bi-weekly show, and our next episode will be on Sunday the 30th of September.
Thank you for listening and take care.